If you find yourself out there looking for a job, whether you're an experienced provider looking to make a change, or if you're a new graduate just coming out of school, you may be wondering about using a recruiter to help you find a job. I used a recruiter for my very first job out of school, and I had a pretty good experience. There's a lot of people I've read have had some pretty bad experiences with recruiters. So how do you know if working for a recruiter is right for you, and what is it like to work with a recruiter? That's what we're going to talk about today, so stay tuned.
Hello. Welcome.
There's a few things that you should know about recruiters. First of all, you should never pay a recruiter. The recruiters are being paid by the employer. So if anybody ever asks you to be paid for their services, then I would not use them. I would find somebody else. So there are two types of recruiters, basically, and the type of recruiter they are can make a difference in the experience that you have. There's contingency recruiters, and basically that just means that the recruiter does not get paid unless they successfully put a candidate into that position. And the recruiter doesn't have exclusive rights to that job. There are multiple recruiters trying to put people into that position. So as you can imagine, that makes them a little bit more concerned about getting a warm body into the position versus being more concerned with having the right fit. So the other type of a recruiter is called a retained recruiter. And basically, their services are being retained by the company that's hired them, and they exclusively represent that job, and they have more of an incentive to find the right candidate or somebody that's going to be a good fit because they want to have a long-term relationship with that client. So you can ask a recruiter that you may be working with or that you're looking to work with whether they are a retained or a contingency recruiter. It doesn't mean that the contingency recruiters are bad or won't do a good job, but you're more likely to get better service from a retained recruiter. So let's talk about the pros and cons. For me, one of the pros is that you can talk to the recruiter a little bit more openly about the job and what it's offering. There's that little less nervousness or pressure because you're not specifically speaking to a potential employer, you're speaking to somebody who's kind of in between. So you can ask a lot of questions about the job and how the practice is set up. Now, they may or may not know the answers, and depending on the recruiter, they may go back and ask those, try to get the information for you, or they may just say that they don't know. But they can give you a pretty good feel about the job to begin with, more than you might see in just a general job posting on Indeed. And often they will tell you what salary range this job offers. That way you can know pretty much up front whether you're even interested or not. So, there's a ton of job postings and they have just a salary is competitive and you have no idea what that means. So when you talk with a recruiter, they will almost always tell you what the salary range is that's being offered. And in that same vein, they can help you a little bit in negotiations. Now, you always have to remember that they are working for the employer, but they don't really have a dog in the fight, so to speak, for what salary you negotiate. Their job is just to match, the best candidate to the client. So I know, since it was my first job, I was a little nervous about negotiation, and I had a good recruiter, and I could talk to him about those. I could ask him some of the questions that I would be really hesitant to ask an employer, and get their thoughts on what I was thinking as far as negotiation. Now, having said that, you have to remember that they are not looking out for your best interests, and you have to take everything they say with a bit of a grain of salt, and you have to remember that they are being paid by the employer. They can help to get your resume and get you kind of noticed by hiring managers and kind of moved up to the front. They want to get that position filled. So if you come across as a good candidate, they're going to do everything they can to get you into that position. Recruiters may also have a pretty good relationship with the employer, especially a retained recruiter. If it's a large company that often has vacancies and they use the same recruiter, that recruiter may know a lot more about that particular facility or management, and you can pick their brains about that a little bit. They also may have gotten feedback from people they have placed who have left for various reasons. And so you can get just a little bit more information that way and try to get a little better snapshot of what it's like at that particular clinic. The other thing to consider is that recruiters may have jobs that are not advertised anywhere else, and that may be your only way of finding out about that job. The recruiters also can facilitate your travel if you are, especially if you are interviewing out of town. They can line up and pay for your flights and get your lodging and rental car while you're there. I was in Texas and I interviewed out in Southern Oregon. So the recruiting agency handled all of that at no cost to myself, and put me up in a pretty nice hotel for 4 or 5 days, and I interviewed on site there. Probably one of the biggest dangers or downsides of working with a recruiter is that sometimes recruiters are hired to fill positions that the people cannot get filled. They're difficult positions because it's just a bad working environment, or they are expecting incredible volume and low pay, those kind of things. And the recruiters may paint a much rosier picture of what's actually happening there. So you really, when you work with a recruiter, you really have to do your due diligence. You really have to take everything they say with a grain of salt, and you have to check out things for yourself. So some of the recruiters can put a lot of pressure on you to maybe accept something that you're not really sure about, or just kind of really push you into something, especially when it's like a contingency recruiter who is competing against other people and they just want to get their candidate in there and get that job filled. So you have to make sure that when you work with a recruiter, or if you're looking to work with a recruiter, make sure that you feel confident in your ability to say no to something that you don't want, and to not cave into pressure to accept something that you're not happy with. Also, when you're working with a recruiter, they're like an intermediary. So you may not have as many direct dealings with the employer as you would if you applied to them maybe directly. So you may have less chance to actually gauge what that employer is like, what their interactions are like. You may not talk to them as much to see if you kind of click with them or not. Of course, you will interview with them directly and hopefully have an on-site visit, so that'll give you some chance to do that. But since some of the process is going through somebody else, some of that time that you would spend one-on-one with a potential employer is going to be decreased. So should you work with a recruiter or not? I really can't answer that question for you. There are people who have had great experiences and bad experiences. Like I said, I worked with a recruiter. I really liked that process, especially for my first job. I kind of felt like I had somebody that I can bounce some questions off of, and it made it a little less stressful. I may have just been lucky and had a good recruiter. I don't know, but I have read people who think that it is absolutely the wrong idea to work with a recruiter and have had bad experiences. I think working with a recruiter is great for somebody who was like me. I wasn't tied to a specific area. I was open to working just about anywhere in the United States, and I really wasn't sure what specialty I wanted to work in. So it was a daunting task to try to find jobs. When you talk to a recruiter, you tell them a little bit about what you're looking for, and then they can look and see what positions they have that you would probably mesh with pretty well. So it doesn't guarantee you're going to find your dream job, but it is another way to kind of personalize that job search and narrow things down a little bit more and try to get you into a position that would really resonate with you. So another situation that recruiters are very helpful in is if you are looking to work in a smaller town or like a rural area. A lot of times those facilities and clinics will use recruiters because they need to cast kind of a wider net in order to find qualified providers. So overall, unless you're really afraid that you'll be pressured, or you just don't want to go through a third party, I think that using a recruiter can be a good thing. You may not want to use them exclusively. You may want to use them as a tool. You are not obligated to the recruiter just because they tell you about a job and you start talking about it. Even if you go on a site visit, you're still not obligated to take that job. You still can be using other tools to search for jobs, but I hope that you wouldn't be afraid to use a recruiter. So what if you do land that great job, whether you use a recruiter or find one on your own? How do you prepare yourself for starting to work in that specialty, whether it's family medicine or some very specialized area? Well, I recorded a video that may be of interest to you. The focus of the video is about transitioning from one specialty to another, but there's a lot of good tips in there for how to prepare to work in that particular area. I'll put a link to that video down below in the description section, and there'll also be a link at the end of the video. Thanks for joining me today. Good luck out there if you're job searching. I wish you all the best and hope you find a very fulfilling and rewarding position. Take care, stay sane, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.